Have you ever wondered about the intense moments that occur in the blue skies during an aerial confrontation? Let's delve into one such high-stakes encounter. Our story begins with the Breguet Brar 1150 Atlantic, a French-built aircraft Flight Atlantic 91 of the 29 Squadron. This formidable machine was a frontline aircraft of the Pakistan Navy, primarily used for patrol and reconnaissance missions. On a seemingly ordinary day, Atlantic 91 left Mehran Naval Base in Pakistan. The time was just past 9 in the morning, local time. As the plane ascended into the skies, unbeknownst to the crew aboard, their flight path was about to take a dramatic turn. Across the border, nestled in the Indian Air Force ground radar station, a blip appeared. It was the Atlantic 91 approaching the India-Pakistan border. The stakes were rising, the tension palpable. In response, the Indian Air Force, like a vigilant watchman, took immediate action. From the Indian Air Base at Nalia in the Kutch region, two IAF MiG-21 interceptor aircraft of No. 45 Squadron were scrambled. These MiGs, agile and swift, were the chosen sentinels to intercept the incoming Atlantic. With their engines roaring, they took to the skies, their mission clear: intercept and engage Atlantic 91. The stage was set for an aerial confrontation that would be remembered for decades to come. But this was not a simple game of tag in the skies. As the MiGs closed in on Atlantic 91, a series of maneuvers unfolded, each move and countermove adding a new twist to the confrontation. There are conflicting versions of events from both sides, adding a layer of intrigue to the narrative. Finally, the Indian jets were given clearance to shoot down the Pakistani plane. The time was 11:17 a.m. Indian Standard Time, nearly 2 hours after Atlantic 91 had taken off from Pakistan. A tense standoff was about to take place in the skies, one that would forever be etched in the annals of aerial warfare history. What goes into making a decision that could potentially alter the course of history? In the high-stakes world of aerial warfare, one such critical decision unfolded on that fateful day between the Indian Air Force and the Pakistani Breguet Brar 1150 Atlantic. The Atlantic 91, a vital part of the Pakistan Navy's patrol and reconnaissance fleet, had taken off from the Mehran Naval Base in Pakistan. The Indian Air Force's ground radar picked up the plane as it approached the India-Pakistan border. Two Indian MiG-21 interceptor aircraft from No. 45 Squadron were then scrambled from the airbase at Nalia in the Kutch region. The situation was tense, and the stakes were high. The two jets were in pursuit of the Pakistani plane, engaging in a series of high-speed maneuvers. But here's where the narratives diverge. From the Indian perspective, the Pakistani plane had violated Indian airspace, a breach of international law. They argued that the Pakistani plane ignored repeated warnings to turn back, leaving them with no choice but to consider it a hostile entity. Hence, the decision was made to give the jets clearance to shoot down the Atlantic. On the other hand, the Pakistani version of events paints a different picture. They maintain that the Atlantic 91 was on a routine training mission, well within Pakistani airspace. They argue that the Indian jets intruded into their territory and attacked without provocation. These conflicting narratives underline the complexity of decision-making in such critical situations. On one hand, there's the need to safeguard one's territory and maintain security, and on the other, there's the risk of escalating tensions and causing a potential international incident. In the end, a choice was made. The jets were given clearance, and the confrontation between the Indian MiG-21S and the Pakistani Atlantic 91 escalated, leading to an event that would reverberate around the world. A critical decision was made, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation in the skies. What happens when a missile locks onto its target in the sky? In the high-stakes confrontation between the Pakistani Breguet Brar 1150 Atlantic and the Indian MiG-21S, every second was critical, but none more so than when Squadron Leader P.K. Bundala, an experienced pilot of the Indian Air Force, made a decision that would change the course of the incident. As the Atlantic continued its flight, the Indian Air Force had been closely monitoring its trajectory. The stakes were high, and the tension was palpable. The Atlantic was a frontline aircraft of the Pakistan Navy, primarily used for patrol and reconnaissance. It was a significant asset, and its presence near the India-Pakistan border was a cause for concern. From the Indian Air Base at Nalia in the Kutch region, 2 MiG-21 interceptor aircraft of No. 45 Squadron were scrambled. Their mission, to intercept and, if necessary, to neutralize the perceived threat. After a series of maneuvers and with clearance from command, the decisive moment arrived. Squadron leader P.K. Bundela, piloting one of the MiG-21S, locked onto the Atlantic. He was armed with an infrared homing R-60 air-to-air missile, a formidable weapon designed to seek out and destroy its target. With precision and skill, Bundela fired the missile. The R-60, guided by its infrared homing system, sped towards the Atlantic. As it closed in, its target was the engine on the port side of the plane. The missile hit its mark, causing significant damage and effectively crippling the aircraft. This was a pivotal moment in the confrontation. The balance had tipped in favor of the Indian Air Force, and the Atlantic was now at a severe disadvantage. The missile attack had altered the course of events, turning the tide of the aerial confrontation. With the pull of a trigger, the fate of the Atlantic was sealed. How does an aerial skirmish impact the narratives of two nations? This question sits at the heart of the aftermath of the encounter between the Pakistani Breguet Brar 1150 Atlantic and Indian MiG-21S. Both Pakistan and India had their own versions of the incident, each shaped by their national perspectives and strategic interests. Pakistan claimed that the Atlantic was on a routine training mission, operating within its own airspace when it was targeted. Conversely, India asserted that the plane was on a reconnaissance mission, intruding into Indian airspace, a serious breach of international law. The nature of the encounter, too, was a subject of debate. Pakistan argued that the plane was shot down without warning, while India maintained that multiple warnings were issued before the decision to fire was taken. As we navigate these conflicting narratives, it becomes clear that the incident was not just about an aerial confrontation, but also about the geopolitical dynamics at play. The aftermath of the incident was as contentious as the event itself, with both nations standing their ground. How does a single incident escalate into a global concern? The aftermath of the aerial confrontation between the Pakistani Breguet Atlantic and Indian MiG-21S is a prime example. In the ensuing days, tensions mounted